All right, so let's just talk about why Cribl Edge matters. I'm going to do a live demo with the usual caveats there, and we'll go into questions. So let's start off with the usual problem with all that data. Just ridiculous amounts of data. Managing your systems, managing your complexity is always going up. You need to retain more data, so you need solutions. And then also tool sprawl. You need solutions that can help scale your team, solve problems quickly, easily, take the friction, take the pain, take typically teams are literally crawling across glass to get anything done. Let's talk about the challenges. I have some fancy marketing terms and we'll go into it a little bit more. Data collection at the edge can't keep up with the scale and types of data for observability. Years ago, at best, it was some logs, standard logs, system logs, and then it's application logs. Now it's metrics of every type, database data. You're trying to pull data out of containers, trying to pull data out of Kubernetes. Scale of data is a significant challenge. The variability of the data is a significant challenge. We got to make this easier. Another issue log shippers is just mastering obscure syntax. It's time consuming, typically doing things on the command line. Everyone's been there about you doing your event breakers, getting your regexes right. It's time consuming. It requires a lot of specialized knowledge, and it's very error prone.
Ed, I don't want to jinx your flow, but in the stream on LinkedIn, the recording prompt is on the screen. If you want to, I think it might be on a different screen there. Just say that you got it and that it's recording.
Oh, that's painful. There we go.
Boom.
Yep. Yeah, it's still going along. But thank you for letting me know. Monitoring data collection and agents it can be very difficult at scale. Everyone's had it happen where you have agents are down, you don't know why, you didn't notice it until someone's looking for that data and it's gone. And then you find out for some reason the agent process is there, but it's not working. It's and because it's one thing to say, hey, I'm monitoring the process, another thing to monitor, is it working? Especially when you're talking about potentially having tens of thousands of log shippers. Then finally, managing updates of edge nodes, scale, error prone, a lot of external tools. Everyone's had the frozen deployment servers. You've had your forest of Ansible scripts, your Puppet modules, your SCCM tooling. If anyone's like me, if you're very lucky, if you can get your log shippers updated once a year, and you just can't do that anymore. You need more options. And then basically what it comes down to, managing log shipping at scale kind of sucks. And so how do we make this easier? I mean, people know about, why does SCCM fail so much? Which Ansible scripts to use, the agents stop working when, deployment server pain. The idea is that you had a deployment server, you reload it, and 3 days later, it's done. And so it's just, you need velocity, you need options, you need to be able to move forward. So this is where we come up with the idea of Edge. Cribl Edge is a small, scaled down tool. It's the same code as Cribl Stream. Scaled down. It's the idea that we can put this tooling on every endpoint, give you lots of flexibility with how you manage your data. And I think that's the primary, is that we're giving our admins, giving our architects capabilities they didn't have before, where they can manage data for all the way out to the edge of their environments, where they can make decisions about, I want to reduce my data here, or I want to reduce my data in stream. I can enrich my data at the source. I can normalize my data at the source. I can manage everything in one UI. I can control my own updates. I could imagine if I could have updated my log shippers on demand, that's almost too good to be true. Cribl Edge is an endpoint-based data collection, logs, metrics, application data. You can run an exec. You can collect any kind of data. If the data is there, it's going to be easy to get. Right now, it's Linux only. The Windows agent's coming. I'm hoping sometime into Q3, going into Q4, we'll have a Windows Edge. I think that's just really going to complete the solution and give everyone what they're looking for, which is ultimately an easier way to get things done. One of the nice things is if you already have Stream, you already have Edge. It's the same bits, same binary. it makes things very simple. The UI is the same. So you can flip back and forth from one UI to the other and do, especially if you're going to be using the leader, and give yourself a lot of flexibility. And that's just trying to make things easy, trying not to have huge deployments of extra servers, and keeping things simple. And this is the best part. You manage Edge. This is the default UI. I'm going to go into the demo in a second to show you. But the idea is that you have concepts of fleets. So this is the organizing principle. So you have groups of servers managing, or groups of configurations that you can then deploy to do whatever you need to do. And just having a nice roll up, having a very good overview of everything you're doing. So let's talk about some of the feature highlights. Easy to use user experience. I think that's what Cribl does best, is keeping the user experience easy, keeping it very visual. Ability to discover logs and files is one of the coolest things. I can't wait to show. The ability just to see everything makes it so much simpler. Metrics collection, easy customization. All of us have spent an enormous amount of time trying to customize our metrics collection, and it just goes away. The ability to run a custom exec command. Always remember, you can only run the exec command as the user you're running Edge as, but you have the ability to fork out and do whatever you need to do. And of course, centralized management, the ability to monitor, ability to update, the ability to just have complete visibility. So nice graphical interfaces and great data. All right, let's go on the demo. Everyone still see my screen? So
yes, sir.
I'm using my Cribl Cloud instance. So just exactly what you see: manage stream, manage Edge. Then I can jump into my Edge management. Got a nice roll up. I got 4 servers here. Have the ability to organize how I want to see my data. Back pressure outputs means it's a great way to understand. Are you having trouble with data delivery? Nice visual displays. Also, you have a list view if that's simpler for you. So your system metrics, your throughput. Let's go in. Let's look at our groups. So this is our fleet and our nodes. You can see, for example, we have one that needs an update. Then we have our monitoring screen. Monitoring screen is very similar. It's the same. If you're used to working with Stream, you're going to know the UI for Edge. The same ability to see everything, to understand what's going on, and the ability to pick and understand, okay, if something's down, if something's not working, just have so much more flexibility and visibility into what you're trying to do. I'll go into some of my favorite features: the ability to explore and understand, also automated container management. Then I'm going to go into setting up data sources. So picking this is a server I have some containers running on. Get a nice overview. And this is something I think that's very underrated. I think Edge can be an excellent place to start troubleshooting. I think this is something that can give people a very, very wide and quick view, especially, outside of just your Elastic or your Splunk team. Give you the ability to just understand what's going on in your system. There's an enormous amount of data here. You have your basic data input, your basic output, and then your node info. This is something that I could easily use for a lot of different work in terms of understanding your assets and understanding your configurations. And here's the coolest thing: I can go in and I can remote into this system, so I can see what's in the system. I can see what the system's doing. It's just awesome. So let's start off with files discovered. Everyone has gotten a request from an application team that says, I want this file to be in Splunk or Elastic. But of course, the path to the file is wrong, or the name of the file is wrong. But with Edge, here you go. I can now see all the files that are open in the system. I can view it. I can validate it. I can see the process names, process IDs. I see the path. I see the mod times. Saves so many. When I was doing this for real, I can't begin to explain how much time was wasted going back and forth of, are you sure this is the right log file? So let's go down here and let's take a look. So I got a Tomcat container set up. So this is running Catalina. Click through and look. I can now see my logs. I can build my event breakers. I can build my event breakers for this data. Don't have to go back and forth with the developers. I can see exactly what's on the file, and I can see the formats, I can see the timestamps. I can then save this data. I can go over and build my visual event breakers. Another just massive time saver. Quick look at the containers, and that's one thing I want to mention. So that file that I just pulled, this is actually from the container. So not only is Edge looking at the data that's on the server, but it's also looking at the container. Very similar experience to Kubernetes. It takes what's a common pain point and makes it a lot simpler. Let's go back. So I installed a custom application. So of course you can see my skill with Java, but this is the idea, is that we want to be able to see it, and that we have the ability to see this data without having access to the container or the server. Let's go over to the container. So really nice container metrics. Yeah, really don't have anything going on right now, but you have the ability to pull this data, see your ports. I can see my port mappings. I think this is something that a lot of people have trouble pulling this kind of data for the containers, but it's already here by default. You just can't beat it. So you're using our memory. Almost undetectable IO, but it's there. But it's just the idea, just getting value and getting fast value, the ability to see data. I think it's just invaluable. Also from the server, we now can also see all the processes. Another way of things that you have to manage. Here's the container again that you can see. So you can see the container name. And so I can also pull data about particular processes. Does anyone have any questions so far?
No questions, but another little logistics. I think the music is still playing on both the YouTube and the LinkedIn stream, and not your voice.
I'm sure the music's better than my voice.
Oh, come on. My mom always said face for radio.
Oh, yeah.
That's not it.
All right. We'll get that figured out. But just the value from Edge way beyond just a log shipper. So not only it's like you can take that parallel analogies of okay, is this you take the parallel analogy of okay, this is like a Splunk UF or Elastic Beats, but it's way beyond that. So think about from a flexibility standpoint, from a maturity standpoint of okay, I'm going to replace my existing log shippers with the same functionality, but then talk about here's how we can get even more functionality of how we can monitor, maintain, gather data. We can have this remoting capability, which I'm particularly excited about. That's where you're jumping right into the server and able to do a lot of work without having access. In these days of zero trust and zero anything, being able to troubleshoot the problems, getting data is invaluable. One thing I just on the phone with a customer, and I think it's just the idea is, enterprise monitoring is looking at it, but if there's a problem, it'll be 2 hours from now before we find out about it. And so this is the idea that I have immediacy, I have control, I have choice over my systems, and also just trying to make it easier. So let's go back here and let's just start walking through gathering data. So I already have set up system metrics. There's another thing that this is just it's not that you can't gather metrics from systems. Elastic, Splunk, take your pick. It's just that typically it's just kind of a pain. It takes time, takes a lot of tuning, takes futzing around on the command line. And this is one more example of just not having to do that anymore. Add a button push so I can have my basic host metrics. So this describes what it is. It's a basic number of metrics. I don't have to do anything. I just say, okay, I want basic or I want everything. I got just full transparency, full metrics that'll be generated is a decent amount of data. If you take this and add up, 50,000 edge nodes, you're gonna hit your license pretty good. But it's just I think the idea is that you have the option to do what I want to do where I want to do it. I think customizations is probably going to be where people really want to be. The idea that customize, I could turn on full process metrics. Same thing as on the CPU. I can say, per CPU metrics, detailed metrics. And just with a couple of button clicks, I've got this all done. I don't have to go in and try to futz around with collect-D or telegraph or anything like that. Got my network metrics. Especially interface filters can be really nice, especially if you're running some interesting networking. Detailed metrics, this is particularly good on the network side. And the disk metrics, this is invaluable. The ability to see your metrics from everywhere. The amount point filter, this is something that we ran into years ago. We started doing this universal forwarder, and of course we had the same 12 NFS mounts everywhere. And so trying to filter this out and manage this, so this gives you that flexibility to only see what you want to see. Of course, then you have the ability to disable things. So just trying to make it simpler. You have the same set of options for containers. The idea that I can filter some containers, I can, just have the ability to only see and only handle what I want to handle, and it makes it easy. And also you have the ability to handle fields. If I'm big on metadata, have the ability to add my metadata to my fleets. For example, if I have a fleet for one data center, I can have my DC1 metadata fields. I can have my application fields. I can have just as much metadata sitting, on each one of these fleets as I want to. Let's go ahead and set up a quick file monitor. So this is something to keep in mind. Have the auto discovery mode where essentially you're going to be pulling, you can just pretty much pull everything you want to pull. But you want to be careful about this. This is something that not everything you want to see. When we looked into the remoting mode, you can see there's a lot more files that are being written to on a system than I may want to pull into my analytics system. Let's go switch over to manual. But it's the same idea. Say if I want to get var log messages. So I switch var, then here's my filter for star var star, and that's going to pick up my var log messages. And then I can have my max depth, so I can pick up everything there that I want to. But you can manage this any way you want to. It just gives you that same flexibility to quickly. So instead of, for example, having to write 10 different inputs, or having to write one for all the var, but then you lose the ability to tag things appropriately. Just makes things so much simpler. Really important, always test your event breakers. For most of your standard Linux systems, that's not going to be an issue, but for your custom logs, event breakers are going to be very important. But then remember, go back with the exact functions. With the remoting, that you can see the logs, and then you can build your rule sets accordingly. Then finally, let's go to where we stitch it all together. So this is the idea where we set up our destinations. Actually, here we go. There. So this gives us the ability to say, okay, we want to send our system metrics. So instead of def null, we're going to send them to Cribl stream. So just give you that nice visual indicators, be able to collect your data. Ideally, you want to have Edge talking to Stream and then Stream talking to your upstream platforms, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can have your Edge nodes talk to pretty much anything. So let's go into the destinations. So Cribl Stream is going to be very efficient. It's going to give you the Cribl Stream output. It's going to be very efficient and give you a lot of compression. It's essentially the TCP JSON output. But if you want, you can have Edge talk directly to Splunk, talk directly to Amazon, Azure Blob, all these different outputs that you're accustomed to. I recommend still using Stream. It's going to be I think it's going to be simpler. It's going to be easier to manage. One thing to keep in mind, you can run pipelines. You can reduce your data with Edge nodes inside the pipeline. Be careful with doing that because you can consume quite a bit of system resources if you're not careful. I would push my heavyweight data reduction, heavyweight data management up into Stream, but that's something that this gives you the flexibility, the choices to do what's going to work for your environment. Finally, let's go into, so there's the Edge nodes. Let's do this. See, this one needs an update, so we're going to force our restart. We'll come back in a second. We'll see that it's uploaded. We'll see that this has nicely been updated. So this same idea here in terms of sources and routes. Also, keep in mind you have the ability to see your queues, you have the ability to see your licensing, top talkers, you have the nice flows data, and also your logs. So it's a nice, complete system, lots of detail, lots of data. So does anyone have any questions? Is there anything I can go into?
Ed, this is Joe. Got a question.
Yeah.
I brought this up at SKO, by the way. This looks awesome. Just curious, I know when this installation happens, this has to happen as root, correct?
Well, and that's something you always have to plan accordingly. And so ideally you want to run Edge as the Cribl user or a non-privileged user. The problem though is typically your data is going to be owned by something else. And so this is something that so you can run Edge as root, but a lot of times your security teams aren't going to want to do that. So you're going to have to come up with ways in terms of managing your data to give you, say, for example, a set of ACLs. Maybe you put Cribl into a special group that also has read access into your varlog, varlog messages, varlog secure, in order to get that data. Docker container is going to be another issue, and that you're going to have to run with a group that has some sort of equivalency as to how you're running Docker in order to have that visibility. And so this is something that's going to have to be, so the flexibility is there, but it's something that you can have to work out internally in terms of access, because unfortunately there's just no one fits all solution. I've seen companies do this a million different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was really just the discussion I was wanting to have is, recommendations on, how would a customer implement this, if root was problematic or something.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, this is something I've had many security teams, and there's like, well, you can't run that as root. Well, so you're like, so you want me to pick up data that is owned by root, but you won't let me have access to root. And so, those are the kind of conversations that you have to have, because to be very frank about it, it's just not easy. I've seen companies will have these really crazy processes where they'll be running set FACLs in all sorts of weird ways in order to try to cross these boundaries. And then when I see them do this, then they run into configuration issue problems where the logging team is constantly trying to chase a lot of complexity. And so those are the things that, I mean, typically what I see is security teams will put a lot of focus on like the Edge agent because it is running as root. But it's one of the few ways to reliably get your data, unless you have a really mature systems where you can do ACLs and you can do group equivalencies. But a lot of companies just aren't at that place, and so it's just not easy. To me, I mean, half the time run it as root and just be really careful about what you're doing. But you have to also mind that the remoting features is now as root. Your ability to run an exec is now root, and so it creates a lot of potential issues, and you've got to balance the risk. Because think about the balance of risk that, okay, we're running it as a non-privileged user that doesn't have access to anything. So that means we don't have our data. Or if we're running it as a non-privileged user with some sort of janky, workarounds in order to get data, that may not work. So it's going to be inconsistent. So we're going to have holes in our observability and our security data. Or you run it as root and you have access to everything, and none of those things are a problem. And so those are the kind of things that are concerning, but I think it's a conversation that everyone has to have with their own security teams. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, it's a great insight. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's some question that we should have, the kind of conversation we have with all of our customers to try to help them work through the complexity of what they're trying to do, because it's just not easy. I mean, one of the few things that I do like about Windows is the ability to delegate that access and do it fairly transparently. I mean, it's one of the few good things Windows has going for it is that you just it's easier to delegate access. I mean, I've done this kind of thing also in, say, an SE Linux environment, which you can definitely do, but you have to have a very mature systems admins team and configuration management team, because it gets really, really tricky. You can't have any one-offs. that this is just going to be a huge issue. And also, this is why. So what I did was I used Wheel, and I'm also in order to get access to all these files. So just there's different ways to do it, and just what you're comfortable with. I think as a company, we'll have to start looking at product options. Maybe we give Edge the ability to run sudo for these commands, in order to give security the visibility to run a privileged command, but then being able to run it. Have any other questions? Anything I didn't go into? Anything? Go ahead.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah.
I actually posted up a question right in chat, and I was specifically wondering about, do we have any architectural guidance for Edge? And you were mentioning a while ago about, hey, limiting what you specifically do on Edge versus shifting to stream. Do we have anything documented around that from a guidance perspective of like, hey, don't run Edge on anything less than, and also don't run routes, pipelines, functions, whatever on Edge, up to this limit and then move it to stream? Or is that still kind of being formulated?
It's still being formulated. There are some minimum requirements in terms of this much memory and this much cores. I mean, by itself, Edge is doing very little. It's still Node.js. So if you're tailing a file, shipping the data, it's going to have very little utilization. Where it gets tricky is on the metrics. It's so easy to blow your metrics out that's the kind of place where that you have to make sure if you go into host metrics and say all, you're going to pull. I mean, it's a lot of data, but it's going to definitely do it. Like for example, you want to be careful about say, I'm going to transform my XML data to JSON on the Edge, then you're going to eat the CPU utilization of that process. And so I think those are the things where I think we definitely need to build some more documentation and build some more guidance in terms of how to think through this, because you just want to be careful and put your transformations where it makes sense. Now, one thing that would be, for example, like enrichment, you can do some normalization, like on Edge. So say, for example, if you have oddities in how your host names, like some of your servers are an FQDN and some of them are short host name, you build a pipeline, for example, that's going to make sure that every server presents itself as an FQDN in terms of logging. Or you can do enrichment on the Edge, lightweight tasks that make sense. Then you can do that. Or just in that way, I try to look at this as giving you options that if it makes sense, I can do this on my Edge node. But otherwise, my general principle is I'm going to do my heavy transformation back on stream. But I think that's the thing. I think we definitely have to do that and give some more information, because it's tricky. And you got to think through it. You can't make assumptions, and because otherwise, I could see someone getting themselves in trouble pretty quickly. That wasn't a good answer, but it's the best one I got.
No, that's actually a good way to put it, because if there is no limitation naturally within or inherent within the product that cuts, whether it's customers or us, off, then it's like you said, just trying to make sure that we're aware of that from a troubleshooting perspective, or even guidance perspective of, hey, like limit how much you do, put everything on stream, that kind of thing. So,
right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And those are the kind of things that is just going to have that complex, because the idea is that we want to give customers choice. I think it's a wonderful thing about choice, but you have to always evaluate those choices and help customers make the right choices, for the situation. And that can be very, very use case specific. I could think of batch servers, for example, where it can make a lot of sense to reduce the data and ship it. Or for example, if I have Edge in one data center and I'm shipping to stream in another data center, maybe reduce it in order to manage your WAN costs. But I think that what we do is we give a set of architectural principles and then help people align their decisions to those principles, because I think that's long term is probably the only thing that's sustainable.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anybody else got any other questions? Well, I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much. We'll get the recording without, of course, the music on the live stream posted to YouTube. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. And I hope everyone has a great day.